So let's be clear about this. Idaho has never really been fully staffed when it comes to healthcare providers. According to a Kaiser Family Health Foundation study from 2019, the Gem State was already dead last in the country when it came to the number of doctors per people in the state. 1.7 physicians per 1,000 people, nearly half the national average of 3.1. Well, that was worse than the year before when, according to the Association of American Medical Colleges, Idaho had 1.9 doctors per 1,000 people. So we were already on the downward slide when the COVID pandemic hit Idaho in the March of 2020, and our hospitals began to fill up with patients suffering the effects of a deadly respiratory virus. Nurses and doctors were forced into an overwhelming string of overtime shifts. We were in crisis standards of care for months. Remember that? A year and a half after it began.
I don't know where the end is. Will Do This Code Blue have to console a family member, because their loved one died from COVID, and then turn around and see that there's a big music festival, downtown, that people are going to large gatherings and not wearing their masks.
Plus, doctors had to deal with a public who didn't really believe COVID was real, some of them telling them that to their faces, loudly and aggressively. All of that led to a lot of burnout and abandonment of their careers, exacerbating the physician shortfall. Governor Brad Little signed the coronavirus emergency declaration on March 13th, 11 days before he signed something else which would greatly impact the number of doctors working in Idaho. On March 24th, 2020, Governor Little signed Senate Bill 1385 into law. That would be Idaho's abortion ban, the trigger law, which would make it a felony to perform an abortion or even try to. A conviction would put the medical professional, in prison for a minimum of 2 years and suspending their license. The trigger would be when Roe v. Wade would be overturned, which the U.S. Supreme Court did 2 years later with the Dobbs decision. Idaho's near-total abortion ban would go into effect at the end of August last year, leaving many of Idaho's OBGYNs and maternal fetal medicine doctors in the crosshairs and confused about what constitutes saving the life of the mother, one of the 3 exceptions to the law. Then came the 6-week ban, then the law which would allow family members to sue medical providers who perform an abortion for $20,000. Then this past legislative session, the law which would criminalize anyone who drives a minor to get an abortion in another state without their parents' permission. All of this adding another layer to Idaho's label of extreme caption contest, something a couple of lawmakers learned last week on a trip back to D.C.
It dawned on us that we actually in Idaho are the worst of the states across the country as far as limitations and just really restrictive laws. We have total abortion bans where some other folks have at least up to 12 weeks.
We're seeing a loss of health care access that really eclipses even the reddest of other states. So we have an extreme emergency in Idaho that exceeds anywhere in the nation. We've already lost 45% of our fetal maternal medicine specialists.
The first noticeable and newsworthy impact came from up north this past March when Bonner General, that is, announced it would stop delivering babies or offering other obstetrical care for several reasons. Loss of pediatrician coverage, a decrease in how many babies they deliver, but also because of Idaho's legal and political climate. Quote, highly respected, talented physicians are leaving. Recruiting replacements will be difficult. In addition, the Idaho legislature continues to introduce and pass bills that criminalize physicians for medical care nationally recognized as standard of care. Did we mention the anti-transgender law, which wouldn't allow doctors to prescribe puberty blockers or hormone therapy to transgender teenagers? So Idaho's shortage of doctors, already dead last, is getting worse, apparently. Last month, we spoke with St. Alphonsus about this, who told us they are losing 2/3 of their maternal fetal medicine physicians because of Idaho's political climate. Today, we're hearing from St. Luke's, who can concur. There's no doubting Idaho's dearth of doctors.
Burnout's real. We absolutely are seeing that. We have a high number of physicians and other providers who are saying, hey, I've had enough. I'm looking at retirement. I'm looking at that next phase of my life. That's definitely happening.
The workload isn't the only thing overwhelming right now.
So yes.
Dr. Frank Johnson, St. Luke's Chief Medical Officer for Boise, Elmore, and McCall, says that Idaho politics are also something to deal with.
Yeah, I'd say it's real. We have lost doctors because of the abortion laws, total abortion ban law. Really, it comes down to that criminalization of the physician-patient relationship. Doctors, my colleagues, myself, are ethically committed to serve that patient in front of us, have shared decision making, and have a discussion of risks, benefits, limitations. That's what we do, and that's what our expectation is. When there are laws that criminalize that conversation, potentially criminalize that conversation, that creates a lot of fear and anxiety for docs, appropriately so. And the ability to feel supported in that relationship, yeah, it's been eroded by that. So especially when it comes to OB docs or maternal fetal medicine docs, that's where the biggest impact on that law is, and we've definitely seen doctors leaving because of that law.
How would you quantify that?
Yeah, the numbers that we have look like across the state we've lost about 40% of maternal fetal medicine doctors here at St. Luke's. It's a small number of maternal fetal medicine docs. We've had 6, we're down to 4. So we're working, that's a third obviously. It gets really hard then because those remaining docs have an increased burden. Their call responsibility goes up, their clinical responsibility goes up, and their burnout goes up, and their desire to leave goes up. So it becomes this cycle that's really tough to turn around when we start losing those docs.
Because some of those smaller hospitals out in Emmett or up in Bonner County, where they say, look, we can't do labor and delivery anymore, it seems it would put the burden on systems like St. Luke's.
Well, it does. You know, we're here to support those smaller hospitals, the critical access hospitals, and provide services when they can't. That's our commitment to our state and our community and our region. So it does. It creates an increased burden on an already shrinking pool of docs to provide that care. It gets tough.
What's more difficult right now, recruitment or retainment?
You know, it's a mixed bag. I would say that today, I believe that we have seen the biggest immediate short-term impact of physicians leaving because of the laws that are in place now. I believe. I don't know that for sure. What we're facing now, probably a bigger impact, is that recruitment piece. When this starts happening and physicians are feeling like the laws in the state of Idaho put an undue burden and a risk on their profession and on their practice and on their ethical responsibility, they tend to shy away. They're not eager to come here when there's plenty of other options around the country that they can partake in. When we talk to recruits, they ask about support for the independence of physicians and the physician-patient relationship. They ask for the impact of that criminalization of physician practice and what that might mean for them. And yeah, they've got those questions. It is a concern. So it makes it difficult to recruit across the board.
Dr. Johnson tells me that to address the need of maternal fetal medicine physicians, that St. Luke's brings in what are essentially traveling doctors. They can fill the need short term, but they aren't really a long-term solution, as many of those doctors, they like to move around the country, and St. Luke's isn't able to convince them just to stay here permanently. And Brian, it's an interesting conversation I had with Dr. Johnson. This isn't political, it's reality. My conversation I had with him, I said, look, you know, when you talk about the politics of these conversations, how do you balance that? He said the laws are what they are. You know, at this point,
we're not taking a side.
We're not taking a side, but they're saying the laws are what they are, and this is what we're hearing from doctors that are leaving and doctors we're trying to attract. And it's not just OBGYNs or maternal fetal medicine there. When you have these doctors that are questioning Idaho and they're questioning, how safe is it to practice there, or what is it going to be like practicing in Idaho? Sometimes it's easier just to skip over the state and say, well, I'll just go to Washington or Oregon or Colorado or something else in the region, because Dr. Johnson told me he's had conversations where he has folks that say, I don't want to deal with that. I don't want to deal with the political pressures of it. I'll just move on somewhere else.
We talked about this last month. There was that poll given out to 117 physicians, and 75 of them said they were considering leaving directly because of restrictive abortion laws. 73 of the 75 who said they were thinking about leaving, 73 of them, 97% said it's because of the restrictive abortion laws here in Idaho.
And that's just the reality of what it is. Yeah. We know that the Idaho medical groups, that they try to talk with lawmakers about clarifying the laws, but the reality is this is the situation that doctors feel when they come to Idaho.
And it's not also because of their practice, but because they're trying to raise families here too, and they don't want to necessarily raise them in that environment. All right, thank you very much, Joe.